against all military logic, even though he was an incredible war strategist, he kept failing to take advantage of the situation because he had America's Continental Army totally surrounded. I mean, it appeared that he was waiting for better weather so there could be a better, people could watch and see him defeating America and wiping out America's forces. But he was not attacking. And unbelievably, there was a miracle that took place at that time. General Howe's unaccountable delay was only the opening curtain on what would be one of the most amazing episodes of divine intervention in the Revolutionary War. Because here is where God gave Washington and his greatly outnumbered troops miracle after miracle to let them survive. Again, if I could tell you the whole story, Howe and his troops had surrounded all of Washington's troops. The Continental Army was outgunned, outnumbered. They had no chance. And Howe was just waiting, probably for daybreak, to make his glorious final destruction of our American troops happen. Washington had a plan. Actually, it didn't deserve to be called a plan because it depended on the cooperation of many variables over which he had no control. We could call it a desperate gamble. That would be closer to the truth. But to him, surrender was out of the question, and he was not going to surrender our American troops. Anything was better than that. But what he was asking his men to do was go to suicide unless they came up with a strategy. They knew in the morning that would be great suicide for the rest of the Americans. He said, "We need God's grace to favor us." Washington called the Council of War and informed his senior officers that he had decided to take the entire army down from Brooklyn Heights and across the East River by small boats during the night. And immediately his generals pointed out that it was a full mile across the East River. Once the British fleet got a glimpse of this flotilla of small boats filled with infantry, they would pulverize it and they would be sitting ducks. It was better to die in the trenches. At least there they could die fighting. Washington listened and then informed them that he had prayed and made up his mind. They were going to believe God to escape the enemy in small boats. The first thing they needed was the boats and the men who could handle them. And by coincidence, I put that in quotes, the last reinforcements to have come over from Manhattan were John Glover's company of Marbleheaders, and every one of them was an expert oarsman who had grown up in small boats on the shores of the Massachusetts Bay. The general now ordered them to locate their small boats, all that they would need, and they were soon joined by the 27th Massachusetts, the Salem men, with the very same skills. So suddenly all these men who knew how to take these boats down the river, they were all happened to be there. In fact, there was no wind, there was no rain to cover even any accidental noise. So all of Washington's troops had to be absolutely silent while they took them downriver. He was able to evacuate his entire army, and they said later that the enemy seemed to be blind to their presence. Wow. They just silently went down the river watching the enemy all over on the banks, but the enemy never noticed them. Then God sent a very dense fog to hide the last boats because now it was daylight and the enemy could easily see them in the daylight, but now a deep fog, a dense fog came in as the last boats were evacuated. The fog remained intact until the very last boat with the general himself. Washington waited till the very last boat and he departed in that boat. Then the fog lifted. The shocked British officers and troops ran to the shore and started firing after them, but the musket balls fell into the water 50 to 80 yards astern. without the loss of a single life. Nearly 8,000 men had been extricated from certain death or imprisonment. And after this, they turned back the war and won it for America, and that was God's intervention. Yeah.